everyone. Welcome back to Life Unpotted. Thanks for joining us today for another episode. Super excited about this episode. We sat down with our friend Andrew Anabi, founder of Pool House New York, which is a clothing brand. I met Andrew a few years ago when he was working in New York City as a corporate lawyer, and he ended up leaving his job to find his passion, to figure out what he really wanted to do in this life. He ended up moving to LA to start his own clothing brand, and he's absolutely loving it. And in this episode, we hear all about his journey, how he got to the place he is now, and what it's like for him now to own his own business. So definitely stick around to the end for this one. And before we get into the episode, just want to remind you guys to check out our blog on our website, livelifeunpotted.com. This week's blog post was all about figuring out our why in the creative process, talking about how to build confidence while posting on social media. So definitely check that out. That's linked in our show notes. But we hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And as always, please like and review and rate. Follow us on Instagram. It really helps on our end. Let's get into it. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Sophie. Hey, Daisy. How's it going?
Hey, so happy to have you here today.
Same. I'm excited. It's a good day.
I'm honestly so excited for this conversation. Like, we were supposed to interview you, I think, a month ago, and for whatever, it didn't work out, but I just feel like right now is the right time. So I'm really excited to talk.
I know. It feels like a lot has happened in a month. It seems like it's been longer than a month.
And I know you have a lot going on, which we can get into later on in the episode, but it's funny because we met through a mutual friend because we were both lawyer. Well, I'm still a lawyer, but you were still a lawyer, and I remember we went to like some museum about something contemplating life. So
yeah, there was like that meditation teacher. I remember.
Yeah. He was like, "You are not what you think you are."
Yeah, right.
And then so me and Andrew stayed in touch, and recently I think we like reconvened over social media and like seeing what you were doing, and just we've talked every now and then just about like our progress both respectively. And then I told Daisy about him, and I started showing her all the cool stuff you were making, the hats, the tote bags, and everything, and just like feeling so inspired by where you are. And that's kind of why we wanted to bring you on here to hear about how you got to the place you are now, and also how it is being in the place you are now.
Like, this is honestly the first time since I left law, so we haven't got into that, but I used to be a lawyer, that I feel like I'm on stable ground. Like, it's been a journey, like a lot of ups and downs, a lot of roller coasters. Wouldn't have changed the experience. I think all of that stuff needed to happen. I feel like I'm in a really, really good place now, but it took a while to get there.
That's awesome to hear. So why don't you take us back to like, I think so we were same year, so around 2018 when you first started at the law firm. I know you worked at a pretty big, like prestigious law firm. What were you feeling like? How, like, just take us back there so we can kind of understand and like start with the progression and where it kind of started.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is like bad to say, but like when I first started, at that law firm, amazing people. I was so lucky to have that opportunity, and I think it was meant to happen. If I was at any other law firm, I would have had an absolutely horrible experience. I went in with the expectation of like leaving soon, whether positioning to a firm that did the kind of law that I wanted to do, or starting my own business. And it mainly had to do with, like, the reason why I was in that situation was because like my whole life I was constantly doing things to like impress people. I wanted to go to like this prestigious law, as high as ranking law firm that I could get to in the country. Same thing with the law school. I just wanted to impress people, so I didn't really pay as much attention as I should have to like practice groups. Like, do I really want to be doing this kind of law? Is it just for like the money and the prestige? By the time it was like a little too late, I realized, I probably should have chosen a different practice field instead of like corporate finance, which is very, very heavy, not very creative in my opinion. Yeah, I went in with the belief or want to go to a different law firm or a different profession.
So you felt like at the time that like you knew this was not right and not fit for you, but you kind of were like trying it out to see.
I was gonna give it a good shot.
Give it a good shot.
Yeah, maybe I'm misremembering it completely. You know, it kind of all blurs together, right? And I'm thinking that, right away I wanted to move. But no, I also remember wanting to put my best foot forward and try to make the most of that opportunity, because it was a crazy opportunity. So many people would kill to be in that position. And like that was like what I wanted since I got into law school, was like a job at a law firm like that.
So interesting, because it's so true. Like, that is what a lot of people would kill to be. That is the life that like society makes it out to be the most highest achieving: doctor, lawyer, banker. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, like when you get into that position, sometimes it's like, okay, I have this now, but am I really happy? So what was your experience with like being a lawyer, being at this top prestigious firm, finally really getting this thing you wanted to get to.
Yeah.
And at what point did you start taking into account happiness? Like, what was the process of, I know it could be so much is always going on, like being a lawyer myself, being as busy as you are, how did you not only find the time, but like how were you able to connect to yourself to start to think about, okay, wait, is this actually what I really want to do?
There was a lot of things that allowed me to really figure myself out. So I went in with that expectation that I wanted to make the most of this opportunity, but I also wanted to explore other things. And it was around this time, I remember it was like New Year's Eve when I first started my legal career, and I just gave up alcohol. I was like, I'm not going to be giving up my weekends to be hungover, because I know that life has the possibility of offering me so much more, and I want to see where that can lead me, and I want to pursue that on the weekends in my free time, any free time that I have. That was a big thing that allowed me to figure out what I actually want. Is this what I want? Because I think alcohol, the partying, the money, all this stuff can cloud your judgment. You can think that, oh, this is working, play hard, work hard. Like, that's what everybody says. And like, at the end of the day, you realize this is a facade and it doesn't mean anything. Like, are you even going to call these people that you meet at the club a week from now, a year from now? You almost never do. And so then I started thinking about my life. What are like the best moments? The best moments were never when alcohol was involved. And I never really enjoyed it, I realized. So giving that up, never had a problem with it, but just realized it was just another thing that I was doing because everybody else was doing it. Around this time, I was also getting into meditation. I forget who turned me on to it. It might have been Tim Ferriss. I think he had someone on his podcast who was an investment banker, and he just sounded like he was going through similar things to me. Like, he just lost motivation to do his like corporate job, or he didn't find like a lot of meaning into it, and he was feeling lost. And I resonated with that because up until that point, I didn't want to do meditation. I thought that would make me soft, or it would make me lose my spark. And then I heard that person, and it seemed like they were doing work at such a high level and still meditating. So I thought, okay, let me give that a shot. And I think that allowed me to really figure out what I wanted in this life.
So did you know, you just start to figure out that like you didn't want to do what you were doing, or did you start to think like, all right, I want to start Pool House New York? Like, what was the kind of time period and time frame for that to all kind of manifest or come to fruition?
Yeah, it was probably like over the course of a year that it all kind of I really started to like think about things. Yeah, there was no inclination to start Pool House at that time. I dabbled in a bunch of other companies. I remember I tried to, with like our mutual friend Dorielle, we tried to start like this real estate company. And then I remember like even in law school, I had a bunch of other side projects that I was working on, just like trying to see what else I can do. At the end of the day, it took me a while to figure this out. It didn't even take me, like, even when I left law, I didn't know this is what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something creative, something artsy. I felt like I was always an artist that just never had the confidence to pursue those things. Pool House thing has been a very wild ride that's like slowly formed, and it's like, it started from one thing and then it's become these other things, then it's come back to the original thing, and it's been this like whirlwind kind of experience. And I think in life that often happens sometimes, like you let go of something and then it has a funny way of coming back.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so interesting that we're here. We're talking about your career progression. You were a lawyer. Now you've started this amazing brand, Pool House New York. And what it really is, it's your life progression. It's like your experiences. And we sometimes miss the point that that's what the core of everything we do. Mm-hmm. The emphasis is not always so much on what are you doing. It's how are you doing it. And also going back to like, what are you experiencing every single day as you're doing this thing? And it sounds like you thought your entire life going into law, you didn't really know particularly exactly why, but you were drawn to it. And then as soon as you start practicing it, you were immediately looking for more creative things, whether that's creating a podcast for your law firm or giving up drinking on the weekend so you can have more time to yourself to figure that out. So it seems like that was something that was always on your mind. And I think it's really cool to point that out, because that's what has brought you to where you are today. But you didn't know what you were looking for. You were just looking for purpose, it sounds like, and like self-growth. And that's ultimately like what starting your company has allowed you to do. But now you have an output for it. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, in that journey of looking back and noticing this all started with me asking myself, like, what do I want to do, and really questioning the things around you, like the norms of what people were doing, and realizing they didn't fit for you. What is your everyday motivator when you wake up and you go to your office?
every day in the office when I'm talking to Nico, the graphic designer on my team, whenever we think about whether we're going to post something or if we're working on like an ad or anything, I'm like, are we proud of it? That's always the question. Like, are we just doing this for the attention or because we think it's trendy, or does this really inspire us? Because if it doesn't, then what the hell are we doing? Because like then it's like there's no difference between this and law at the end of the day. And that's what I slowly realized over the course of Pool House's evolution, because I did do things that felt very like mechanical and not as inspiring as every day is at the studio now.
I just want to understand, as you started Pool House, what was the feeling of feeling like, okay, so I know you started first by posting on Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
When did you feel like you were really ready to start? I know sometimes it can be really hard to know, like,
yeah,
I have this drive, I have this thing I want to do, but how do I start? Where do I start? Like, how do I do that? So I want to hear more about that.
It's evolved so much over time, and it's like slowly I've been inching myself more and more into Pool House, like doubling more and down. Am I going to devote all of my time into this project and exploring a variety of ways? You know, do I want to be like, after deciding, okay, I'm leaving law, what do I really want to do? And I had Pool House on the side of working on that, posting things on social media, it's resonating with people, still not really knowing how are you going to monetize this, then doing work for other people, and you know, working on being a writer and all these other things that I was getting, I guess you could say, like rewards from, but realizing that none of those things kind of, like, I kept coming back to Pool House. I'm like, this is the answer, but I was never confident to just fully dive deep into it until this past year, when I, like, my biggest thing was, and I don't know, maybe this sounds so weird, until this past year when I decided to fully go into Pool House, I was always, like, insecure when people would ask me what I did, because it wasn't like cookie cutter thing, or it wasn't like a typical thing that you can explain. And until I doubled down on Pool House, and there was like this, because until then I was doing so many piecemeal things, and it just felt a little chaotic. And when I fully went into Pool House and I said, okay, I'm starting this brand, we do clothing, talk about mindfulness, and it became this overarching thing. It was the first time since deciding to leave law that I was confident in what I told people when they said, what do you do? I was proud to say that. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting thing to say right now out loud, because it kind of goes back to that insecurity of like being a lawyer and just doing it to appease other people, and realizing that it wasn't right. Because even when I said, oh yeah, I'm a lawyer, that didn't feel right either. It was like an easy thing to say. It didn't make me nervous to say it or embarrassed, but it didn't feel right. But when I say, oh, I have Pool House New York, I created this brand, it feels right. And so that was like the litmus test. I think maybe you asked this question before about whether or not I knew like this is what I wanted to do. Should I do these other things or not?
So like, have you dealt with a lot? I mean, obviously, like, I deal with so much self-judgment, something I'm working on right now. Like, it seems like throughout this process of you figuring out, transitioning from being a lawyer into this creative space, entering this new identity, like, how has your experience been with self-judgment?
Like, when you start something in the creative space, or even like in social media, even a business, it's a very lonely experience sometimes, unless you're talking to people on the internet, because there's just so much that needs to be done, and you're also inspired, so you want to do this. So it does get isolating. And then when I would go out, socialize with people and talk to them, I would have a lot of self-judgment, because I'd realize that, wow, all my friends, they're like so far ahead in their lives with these jobs at these companies, or, you know, they're married now, they're thinking of settling down, and I feel like I'm so far behind from that, because I've been devoting the past few years to this crazy project that people said is crazy, maybe until recently. I never doubted myself, because I knew what that life was like, and I knew I didn't want that. But feeling isolated, I think, and like alone more than anything. But now I don't feel like that at all, because I have people on my team. Like, there's people that I interact with every day. It's like, especially with the events, the community events that we've been having at the space, just meeting people and interacting, and then finally getting to meet other creatives and artists who want to do other things to me. It's been a really great couple months, 6 months. Those feelings they're not there anymore.
I feel like with self-judgment, it's so much more pervasive when it just stays in your own head. When you start to share the thoughts with the team or your community, it's reflected back to you that you're not the only one who has these thoughts or has these challenges. And it's so much easier to process it, and you get more confident in what you're doing, and that noise just becomes so much smaller. That's not to say that you can't fully come back to that point of feeling like
insecure
or yeah, self-judgments are going to come up, but it is always going to be something that is there. And it just because like you're able to do it doesn't mean that you're not going to backtrack at times and feel self-judgment over a certain thing someone says or a certain thing someone does. It's something I think
that's so true.
We all constantly face. It's a constant battle. You know, you can practice it, but that doesn't mean it's easy every time you decide not to lean fall into the self-judgment. And I imagine as you are creating more, especially about this topic, that it is cathartic. It's giving you the ability to overcome it and also share it with other people and help them overcome it.
Yeah.
It just helps end the cycle. It makes you stronger in that way.
Yeah, it's very cathartic. Two ways: it's talking with people and writing it down. Like, I think talking is I think they're both just as powerful, but it's hard to rely on being able to talk to someone all the time. That's why I invest so much time and energy into like the writing or the captions, because I find it so incredibly liberating to write down these thoughts and put it down it's a little different than journaling because you're formatting it kind of like an essay for school. So you're really thinking about, does this make sense? And once you're able to break it down in that way, in a way that you want to share with people, it helps you process things on such a deep level. When you put like that essay mindset, think, oh, this is going to be read by other people. That is the most fun thing that I do, is the writing. It's incredibly taxing, but it's the most fun. Even the simple captions, like I love it. Like I don't know, there's something about writing words. I don't know, there's something so beautiful. It's like this world that is not here. Like you're able to, like, especially like reading, you're able to like, I don't know, go into a different galaxy. And it's different than TV because you're like you're like the architect or you're the builder. The writer tells you the blueprint, and then you're putting it together in your mind. And it's a very similar thing when you're writing it yourself. You're creating this world in your head. And
that's incredible. And I mean, it shows clearly because it resonates with so many people.
Thank you.
You had a post recently where you said that nothing is more risky than seeking universal approval. And I think that's relevant to what we're talking about right now. Creating things, having the inner noise of what are people going to think about this, and balancing that with your own passion. Have you, since starting Pool House, had to deal with figuring out, what am I doing because I want to do it versus what am I doing for other people's approval? What has been your process with that? And like, is that something that just you always kind of have to balance when starting a brand or just starting something? Like, how do you balance those two together?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, especially if you want to do something in the social media space, I think, because almost always you're going to find a medium or a format that's going to resonate with people or a topic. And naturally, you're going to want to change topics. You're a person, you change, your interests change, but your audience, maybe isn't at the same speed as you, or maybe not everybody is. And so you're gonna want to change the type of stuff that you're making, but you're gonna be so worried about not pleasing everybody who follows you. And I've had so many changes of Pool House. It started off as a clothing company, and then it was drawings that I was doing, like illustrations. Then the illustrations turned into poetry, and then mindfulness, like prose writing, and like wellness, and then coming back to the clothing. And through like every single one of those stages, there's been so much criticism, not from the majority of people, a very small but loud part of the community. And that is incredibly, like, I don't know how to describe this, but it is so unnerving. It's like a pit in the middle of your stomach. But as I've gotten older, and this is one thing that I've always kind of done, like whenever I get that nervous butterfly feeling where, oh man, like, I don't know if I should do this, Andrew. It might get a little risky. You got to do it. You got to do it when you have those butterflies. And so that's my litmus test for pushing through those moments when you just want to appease everybody. Because at the end of the day, that's just so boring.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think it's so clear in your work because you have such a healthy relationship with failure. I mean, so much of yourself that you talk about, like talking about how failure isn't really failure and how failure can get you to the next thing you want to put out there. And I remember you made that Instagram about you splatting paint all over the sweatshirt because you were like, you put that poll on Instagram, and I think at first maybe you weren't getting the feedback you wanted, but you're like, this is what I wanted to do, and if it quote unquote fails, it's like that's still what you wanted. And that's so inspiring to see, because it's like, I think that so many people we all naturally, our instinct is to we have so much fear, and we have a fear bias, and I think it's like, I don't want to put this out there in disappointment to other people, but you start to realize that like you might be helping more people than you know if you actually push past that fear. And it sounds like that's kind of what you've been doing with Pool House and experimenting with all the different steps and stages you've taken it through of like, this is hard, this is unnerving. I have all these people who follow me and expect things from me, but I'm going to continue to put out the stuff that resonates with me. And it's really so inspiring to see that.
Thank you. And that reminds me of something that because it's hard to still do it, even though you're knowing you're helping people, you still have this reluctance. And that's why I said, what's your guiding light? What's your motivation every day, Andrew? And that's why I said, am I proud of this? Like, that is always the question, like, am I proud of this? And if I am, then it's worth posting and it's worth sharing, regardless the outcome. And sometimes I handle that better than others, but I find that question has helped me push past those moments and find the confidence to do it.
Yeah, totally. I can imagine. I think that like also knowing that's your reference point can always keep you going, right? Because you know that no matter what's happening, if I can wake up and know that like this is what I love, so it's such like an energy force to keep you going.
Yeah.
And I think that's also like, you've also talked so much about like falling in love with the process. And I think all these things are intertwined because like the process is you waking up and feeling nervous and feeling scared. And like, I want to hear from you about like, how have you balanced patience with wanting to grow? And what do you feel about like the process of this all and going through it, but also realizing what your end goal is? Is there an end goal? Is this the goal right now? Like, what has been your relationship with all that?
Yeah, it's I'm at that point now, but I definitely had to where I focus on the process, where it's not about getting to the destination as quickly as possible. You don't even want that. That's boring, like a straight shot somewhere. That's a very boring journey, I think. The exciting ones, I always think about the metaphor of like a novel or like a fairy tale where you're going up this mountain, you're going through the snow, and then kind of like Game of Thrones maybe, and then you end up in this magical destination. It's a long journey, and I think that's how I always try to envision my life as. But it wasn't always like that. I had so many goals where it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to, going back to the law, I wanted to work at a big law firm. And then when I first got into social media, I wasn't as mindful as I am now. I was like, I want to get 100,000 followers and I want to make X amount of money. And once these things happen, you realize that this is not exactly what everyone makes it out to seem. And it's like not getting me where I actually want to go. And realizing that makes me slow down and be patient, especially with, like, let's go back to some of the things we're making now, like this t-shirt that I'm wearing. We spent like almost a year making this t-shirt, and I easily could have used a blank t-shirt. I could have just put a name on a t-shirt that's already on the market. That's how it's usually your decision as a clothing company. Are you going to use someone else's product and put your name on it, or are you going to make your own product? But I was really fast. I wanted to know, like, how do you make clothing? That was a big thing. And then for two, I wasn't happy with any of the t-shirts that I had. Like, I feel like I hadn't worn t-shirts in years because they just all fitted very weird on me. I didn't feel confident in them. So I wanted to go through like what it was like to actually make something with your hands. And I've tried like doing a bunch of things with Pool House and this whole creative journey. And if there isn't a long story, if there isn't a lot of, like, the hard way is always, I don't know, sometimes the better way. Maybe I'm just crazy, but I think shortcuts end up just making the journey so much longer because you realize you actually didn't want to go to that place. If you wanted to take a shortcut, then you actually didn't want to go, and you're just going to turn around eventually and go somewhere else. So you might as well find something where the long path excites you.
Absolutely. Because whenever you take the next step and take that risk or take that leap of faith, it's always going to get you somewhere that you're not right now. And your intention with that, as long as, you're not like you said, like just your mindset is not on getting a certain amount of followers or this or that, where only that will make you happy when you're actually just in the moment and realizing like, what am I learning right now? How have things changed for me? You can always pivot, but that moment is always going to be valuable. As you were talking about how you've learned to be patient, it made me curious as to wondering like how you as a person have changed over the course of your content and your brand as it's evolved. How have you evolved?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel probably the past year, like I'm 30 years old now. It's the first time, probably like maybe this year in my life, that I feel like I've just learned how to talk. Like, as weird as that sounds, I feel like I didn't know how to do that before. And found my voice. I'm confident in it now. I just see things a lot clearer. I think like finding my voice is the biggest thing that's changed. And I love bringing it back to that simple thing. Like I just learned how to talk. Because everyone, you know how to talk, but you don't really know how to talk until you realize that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so nicely just exhibits that you're not going to come out of the gate knowing how to talk. You have to stumble, you have to be uncomfortable, you have to just be unsure of yourself to actually get to a point where, like you were saying, you know how to use your voice. And that one step can be so valuable because it's so empowering. And you have to wonder, you'd taken a different progression and didn't necessarily go into where you're at now. If you would have stayed at your said law firm job, you know, what your voice would look like today.
Yeah. I wonder about that too. I do feel like certain paths like you're meant to take, like there's like different ways to take it. So whether it ended up forming into Pool House or whether I was a lawyer and branched out into other things, I feel like it would have maybe followed a similar trajectory in some way. Kind of think about there's like certain paths that we're meant to follow. In case anyone is listening who isn't confident in their voice, like I can't tell you how nervous I was getting in front of a camera or talking even on a podcast or even talking to people for that matter. I was so anxious and so unsure of myself and so insecure. And now those feelings have just totally dissipated. Like if you probably go back and you watch some of my old like Instagrams or TikToks, like, dang, that's a different dude. I don't know what's going on.
I can attest. No, and I've seen that throughout all your stuff. I remember, like, I think it was a few months ago, I was like, whoa, like Andrew is glowing. Like I feel like I could feel like your energy of you being you. Like no resistance, no holding back. And like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who is struggling with that and feels like they can't change? Because I think so many people feel stuck in society. So many people feel like they can't move forward. And that's a lot of the reason why we're doing this podcast, to show people like you can live the life you want to live. But it's not that easy when you're in it, because you still feel those emotions. You still feel that fear and anxiety. So like, what helped you? Was it just pushing back on, like, pushing through the feelings, or like, what was it?
Now that I'm thinking about this year, there's one concrete thing that I think would help a lot of people. And if you have the opportunity, take acting classes. I did that this year and I found it the most liberating thing. It allowed me to just be confident with who I am and to like follow certain paths and to find my voice. And I actually the funniest thing is I majored in theater and acting in college before I went to law school. Originally, I was planning to go to medical school, and then it changed to law last minute. But I majored in theater because you can major in anything for those two professions and still go to those schools. And I was always kind of like drawn to it because I feel like maybe it was my subconscious telling me, oh, this is something that you need, Andrew. So I was always being pulled towards it. And I found it very, very helpful. Not that I actually don't have any aspirations to be an actor, to be in movies. I always wanted autonomy in like a weird way. I wanted to be able to like be in the driver's seat, and it just seemed like there was so many like geniuses that needed to be in a room for a movie. Basically, I'm just saying that I do it because it's just good for the soul, and I feel like everybody would get a lot of value from that. And I go to this acting school by Anthony Mandel, and his book, the first book that he wrote, is so dang good. It's not even really for actors, just for people who live their lives, but it is just some good knowledge. It's called From Left Brain Turn Right, and I used to read it. I occasionally pick it up all the time too. I reread a lot of books, and this is one that I reread quite often, From Left Brain Turn Right. So I recommend that.
That's so interesting, because I feel like you could have all these like breakthroughs in your mind, but when you go out there in an acting class, I can imagine you're like embodying this person you want to be, kind of, and you're like you're like connecting with. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. After hearing you say it like that, I imagine, you know, when you want to make change or make growth in your life, like you have to, as you're trying to make that change, it feels really uncomfortable. So I imagine having to, like, you're fully throwing yourself, like when you're acting, like you can't just have to it.
No.
Like you're not going to pass the class.
And everybody's looking at you just like, and everybody's looking at you just like in real life. So
it's the most pressure, I think, that you can, I think automatically when you go on a stage, and At least I know I feel this way. Like I start to feel like hot. So subjecting yourself to like physically hot, uncomfortable is what I mean by that, to clarify.
I feel really hot.
I guess what I'm saying is that I understand why that would be such I think first and foremost, you're making yourself extremely vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
And I think whenever you're looking to make change, you have to first be vulnerable, and you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I think that itself can be a wall. Was that something that you struggled with, or were you able to open yourself up since you practice it so often with your work when you went to the first acting class?
I don't think so. I mean, I never recorded myself in the beginning, so I have no idea. But I've definitely evolved a lot. I feel like I've gotten so much better in the classes, so much more. I had like one of the best days ever actually on Thursday. That's when I go to class. And the past like 2 months, I felt really different, just a lot more willing to be vulnerable and go into those situations. And the funniest thing is the hardest scenes, and going back to like to vulnerable, because you have like a bunch of people who are looking at you, and you feel like they're judging you. And the hardest scenes were always the ones that like I've been through that for the character, right? And you think it'd be easier. You relate to the character, so you understand them more, but you realize that when you do that, you're putting yourself on the stage versus like these eccentric roles where I was doing, like I did Always Sunny in Philadelphia one time, and then True West. True West is like kind of like a drama, but it's also like very eccentric. But I felt so confident in those roles because they were just so out there. But the ones of
so unrelatable to you.
Just different people. And I felt like, it was an escape from who I was versus some of the roles where there was like a breakup scene with this guy and this girl, and like just knowing what that's like and how uncomfortable that is. Oh, that was like one of the hardest ones. But it was it's a thing that we've all experienced. It's something I have. And yeah, it was funny to think that was the hardest one. That was one of the hardest ones.
It's also interesting because from what you're telling me, you're forcing yourself to feel certain things. And I think one of the things that can really hold people back is by not allowing themselves to feel something that they're feeling. So they get stuck in that feeling forever until they're able to, allow themselves to feel it. But with acting, like what you said, like been through a breakup, know what that feels like, to and create that. Like you've healed from this, you've done this, but to recreate that and feel that, it's really difficult. So it helps you get comfortable by feeling uncomfortable with uncomfortable feelings, which is so valuable that I don't normally think that we're taught in like quote unquote traditional educations. But it's such an important one, to being able to tap into being yourself comfortably.
Yeah. It's like, you're going back to like things that you've already felt, but it's also another opportunity to do it right, if you get what I'm saying, versus when it actually happened to you, you weren't the confident person. You didn't have the hindsight now to handle it the way that you maybe should have. And now you have this second opportunity. It's make-believe to handle it in the way that you wish you did. That's a lot of pressure, because you've done that situation before, but you haven't done it that way, the way that you wanted to do it. Just like life, it's like going after the thing that you wanted to do.
I want to also ask Andrew, like I'm not sure if we've talked about this. I think we have a little bit, but throughout the process of transitioning from becoming a lawyer to starting Pool House, were your parents supportive of this? Did you ever face any obstacles with them, like transitioning? Because I know, like for me, like I have a lot of pressure from my family being a lawyer and being a prestigious job and whatnot. So I'm curious to hear from you about that.
My parents, no. I mean, I'm from like an Arab household, so there's a lot of familial pressure. I'm not gonna glance over that. Parents were like very supportive, incredibly worried, and their anxiety gave me anxiety, but they were always supportive. It's not that anybody said anything wrong. I just didn't feel comfortable sharing it with everyone, because especially the way older people, like the grandparents and like their friends, because the conversation's always like, Andrew, doctor, you're gonna be doctor, right? And I'm like, no, Grandpa, I'm a lawyer now. He's like, doctor.
Oh my God. That sounds about right? I mean, they can't help it. It's just the way they grew up, like very like narrow-minded. They want the best for you, and then
Yeah.
being a doctor they think is the best for you.
And that was the only way for them to give themselves a good life back, like coming from Jordan, right, where there was no opportunities and there was a bunch of like racism and hierarchies. Like my grandpa, he wanted to, my mom said he wanted to be a lawyer, but since he wasn't Muslim, he couldn't, they weren't allowed, if you're a Christian in Jordan, to become a lawyer or do anything that was prestigious. So, and yeah, my dad was picking up like bullet shells from the ground in Jordan, like recycling them like during like the war. And so there was such little opportunity there. So it's hard to judge anyone coming from that situation and just realizing it's all coming from the best place. And we're all doing our best.
That could be really helpful, I think, just like as you grow and seeing your parents, just realizing like they had such different upbringings than you. It's no one's fault. It's just like what their own experience were. They were trying to get through. They were trying to survive, frankly. And it's like, I think having that sympathy and that empathy as you progress with yourself to like still love your parents and still respect them, even though you guys may be going in entirely different directions. So it sounds like you have that understanding, which is awesome.
Yeah. My parents, just for the record, they were always great. Like never, in case they listen to this, like I'm gonna give them the credit that they deserve. Because of all the parents, like even, like it was crazy. It's like I was the only male in my entire family who didn't go to medical school, for one. Never like felt the pressure to be exactly like my parents. And I feel like a lot of Arabs, you're forced to be the reincarnation of your mom or your dad. And my parents gave me the freedom to skateboard when I was a kid, to do acting when I was in college, to not dissuade me from these things. I know a lot of people in similar situations who just did not have that kind of emotional support. So very, very, very lucky and blessed.
Community is so important for that reason. It reflects back positively to you. But what you're doing is great.
I also want to ask, so on the realm of community, so as Pool House is progressing, how have you been building community? Like can you talk a little bit about like what you've been doing at Pool House? Like I know you've been hosting a lot of events.
Yeah. And so hosting art shows, some breathwork events. We have some more art shows and some mindfulness workshops coming up soon. And also bringing people onto the team, like Nico, I'm a graphic designer. Jared, he's also on the team. He helps basically just manage everything. And like there's so many people involved. I also go to my mom for so much advice. She's always like I don't know, I love being able to talk to her about where my head's at. So like talking with those people like that's one community. And then also too with other people, whether it's artists or other creatives or people who want to explore something that's in the health or like wellness space, being able to connect with them in the real world has been such an amazing experience, because you kind of get caught up like that everything happens online, at least in today's age with if you are a millennial or Gen Z or all this stuff. But there is so much more power with meeting people in real life and connecting with them. And I feel like it's such a rich and like an emotional context experience to have these events, and they've been so much work, and it doesn't have the same ROI in terms of like finances as, you know, selling something online or, you know, promoting something online or just doing anything online, right? Online scales. And when you look at the numbers, that is what is probably the best business decision. But being able to connect with people in the real world and host these events has been such a rewarding experience that you can't put a value on it, I think. And it's important to allow yourself to pursue those opportunities, I think. So I think, yeah, it's a big pillar. So Pool House, we have three like main, like over the course of the years, realizing what do I want this to be? What do I want to do? And the three big pillars of Pool House is the sense of community, developing that with people, because that's always something that I lacked. I always wanted to congregate with other creatives or artists or just people who have this similar mindset, but I felt like I was always like tracked towards like business and corporate world, and I always wanted that sense of community. And that was actually the original idea for Pool House when I got the name, was to create like a social club in New York City. I remember when I was in law school, it was like my second year, one of my friends, we got the Instagram handle Pool House New York because we wanted to create this community for people in the city, which we felt we lacked. And then I put that on the back burner for the longest time, and I ended up reusing the handle because I just felt good about the name when I first started this whole creative journey about posting content. I knew that there was something there, and now it's coming back to that. And then also the clothing, which was the original impetus for Pool House when I was thinking about leaving law. I think there's something so beautiful about making physical products in the real world something that people can share. Like it's such a unique experience when you see someone like wearing something that like relates to you and you being able to share that experience with them, and then having an idea for something and making it come into the physical world. It's really such a powerful experience, and I think we kind of lose track of that in the online world. So bringing it back to physicality, and then the art and the creative aspect, which has always been something that I've never wanted to lose, and keeping that alive through the graphics, the writings, the art shows, and so yeah, those are the three pillars: the community, the clothing, and then the the art. And yeah, and clothing is also art too, like in a very real way. I was always so attracted to clothing because one, I always like felt uncomfortable in my body. I was like the overweight kid who was picked on growing up, and so I always felt like self-conscious, and clothing was a way to make me feel more comfortable about myself. It's always such a fun thing to like find clothes that fit, and then over time realize, I don't know, most clothes there wasn't a lot of intention that was being made. It was a lot of fast things that people were just throwing away, or wasn't a lot of care. And I kind of wanted, not kind of, I did, and I do want to change that trajectory. I want to make something that matters for people, and so that's one of the ways that I want to do it, is through that. And it's also a very yin and yang. It's one of the few fields where you can blend creativity and business, which I think is so cool. Because it's hard
awesome.
It's hard to like make a living off of creativity, off of artistry. I talked about it before on Instagram. Like a lot of people who were artists in the 70s and 80s, they were in advertising, right? Because that was one of the only modalities that you could finance yourself.
It obviously sounds like it's so intricate. There's so much that goes into being an artist, being a creative, and finding your passion. And one thing we've talked a lot about in the past is like how clearly this sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like it is hard. But then of course, like we've talked about how being a lawyer was also hard. And I remember you said something to me along the lines of like, I would rather do something that's really hard, that like I really resonate with, and versus not, because it's kind of like a different kind of pain. I forgot exactly what you said. It was really inspiring. I remember I wrote it down. What's the difference in the kind of difficulty of going through now and starting Pool House versus the difficulty of being a lawyer?
Yeah, there was no like inspiration, no motivation. That was the hard part. It was easy in terms of like the trajectory, right? You have a blueprint. You know, I go to school, I get this job, I do the interviews, you know, I'm here 8-9 years, I can become a partner. If not, maybe I'll go in-house somewhere. There's like a clear trajectory. So it's easy in that respect, but it's hard in the sense, at least for me, that it lacked purpose, and I just didn't have a good reason to get out of bed in the morning. I just dreaded going to work. And on the flip side, there is no blueprint for what I'm doing now. It's incredibly like nerve-wracking thinking about whether or not something's going to work out, or if you're on the right path, because it's all a new terrain. But I'm so excited to wake up every morning. You know, I'm excited to go to the office. The studio is I just love being there. It's weird. I don't know. It's just so.
It's not weird.
It's
amazing.
It is when you're like there at 8:00 eating dinner. Like, you know, it's like, oh man, okay, you're not even home. You don't even want to go home, Andrew, to eat dinner. Okay. It's hard because of that lack of like insider advice that you typically get in your profession. There's a lot of unknowns, but it's exciting. And yes, some people, that's just they're just I don't know, destined to do something like that, where there isn't that kind of trajectory. And I think it's all about having the confidence to go down that path if you think that is what you wanted to do.
And do you think like I have these thoughts a lot, like, oh, does everyone just have these thoughts of wanting to do something else? What kind of advice, like, what are some things, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's in a job right now, or in a position in life, and they don't feel like they fit in? Like, what are some things to look out for, like thought patterns, feelings, emotional states, that can kind of indicate to someone, okay, maybe this doesn't fit you?
Yeah. One question that I asked, and I feel like we've talked about it before, Sophie, someone said that whenever they have a difficult decision to make, they ask themselves, what would they want their hypothetical children to do if they were in their position? Yeah, I meditated on it for a long time, and I always said I would want my child to be safe, to do something where like a clear, they had a vision for where they were going, right? There was like a plan in place. And over the course of a year, that answer changed, and I realized more than that, actually, I wouldn't want them to stay somewhere just because they were scared. I wouldn't want them to do something just because, especially something that they did not enjoy, something that they maybe hated, just because they were afraid of the unknown. And so I think that's a very important question in order to like figure out what do you want to do after that, you know, saying maybe you don't want to do that. Like, do you want to do something creative? Do you want to do something more business oriented? Because those are very different modalities, right? I think I kind of dabbled in both because I've always been interested in both spaces. But after that, I'd ask yourself, like, you know, what do you want? Do you want to have your own business, or do you want to be an artist or creative? And if you want to be a business person, you know, work on how do you make a product? You know, what's the process of putting together a physical good? And then if you're an artist, my biggest thing would be to learn the Adobe suite. Like, that is like, if you question yourself at all in what you want to do in today's world, get good at every single application that you can of Adobe. At least like the big ones like Illustrator, Photoshop, especially Photoshop. I think photos are still incredibly valuable. But I think that gives you so much, and that's why I needed so much time with Pool House, and that's why it's only finally come together, because I needed to get good at things that I just had no aptitude in, being a lawyer or being an actor, or not thinking of going to medical school, right? I didn't know how to create like a graphic or record a video or like do this podcast, you know, like what microphones do you buy? How do you edit this? And these are all incredibly valuable skills that I think are very valuable to learn. You'll be indestructible if you learn them.
And of course, there's going to be a learning curve. Like, I think what deters so many people from changing what they're doing is because they know I have to learn all these things. I have to learn all, like, figure out all this new stuff. But it's like, that is what's so exciting. That's exciting, right? And it's like, and I'm sure you've like dealt with this, just like, oh, like figuring out how making these clothes can be so tedious. But like you've said all over your Instagram, of like, that's the beauty. That is it. You're not at the top of the mountain yet.
And the way that you get that mindset is going back to that first thing I said. Are you proud of the work? Because at first you're going to judge yourself. You're going to be like, this isn't as good as X, Y, and Z who's posting it. That's why you have to do something that you're proud of, because then you'll put on the blinders and you'll be like, this is actually really good. And it will be, because you did something that you were proud of. So I always go back to that. I think it's such an important thing.
It is an important thing. And it makes me think of like when we're doing this podcast, the mics always fail. Whenever we're setting up, something always goes wrong. And you know, when we called you to let you know that we were having a mic situation, and we had to end up having one mic that we shared. You can't tell here if you're listening, but we're sharing a mic, Sophie and I. So, you know, uncomfortability comes with this, so, but, you know, there's two routes you can go. You can self-destruct and say, oh, like I'm so mad. Everything's gone wrong. This is not meant to happen. And this is going to happen every time you podcast, or every time there's always going to be like frustrating problems that are always going to arise. And if you say, oh, like calmly, like respond, like I feel really, you know, this show has to go on because what I'm doing is meaningful. You know, it's not going to be as easy as I thought it was, but you keep persisting and persisting and persisting, and that's what feels good, because you're not selling yourself short, and you really care about it. And that's what it sounds like your trick is. Like, you really care about what you do. And I think that's a really valuable reminder, because so much of like what we do our entire lives, whether it's school, our career, and some people do really enjoy these things, but we're kind of taught to be good at things that we don't necessarily, that we have to do, which is important. That's so important, but it's another power when you realize I really care about this thing coming to fruition, and people hearing it or seeing it, and it's like a double motivator to persist.
Yeah, and nobody's gonna notice the little, like, I guarantee most people didn't even notice your audio thing. It's like, we're always our worst critics, and realizing like if you put that care and attention into it, that's really all that's gonna matter. That's what's going to resonate with people.
And I'd say no one is ever thinking about you as much as you think they are.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. True, yeah, we are our worst critics. Everyone's worried about what they're saying.
And when you can recognize that, it's like that's where their freedom comes, because it's like on Instagram, like you might spend like 5 hours on a post, and most people will read it, but they won't notice, oh my God, like I can't believe he missed that. Like, but to you, it's the biggest deal. And I think recognizing that, like, some things matter, but some things, like, you have to just let go and realize, like, you have to keep going.
Yeah. There's like a certain balance between, like, there's nothing wrong with, you know, caring a lot and wanting to make it as best as possible, but not letting yourself not put it out into the world and share it, because it's not like up to like this perfect standard. And I really do think like quality begets quantity. Like the way you get better at something is by like repeatedly doing it. I always go back to this like famous study of this like art class where the teacher, and this is like a real example, the teacher asked the students, okay, half of the class is going to make a sculpture every single day, and you're going to be judged on the last sculpture that you make on the day of the final. And then the rest of you students, you're just going to make one sculpture and you're going to turn it in at the very end. And by the end of the process, all of the students that got A's, they were in the first group, the one that made one sculpture every single day, instead of the ones that, you know, try to make the perfect one. And so I think it's important to give yourself those repetitions. But the caveat is, it is so easy to get into like the hedonic treadmill that way, and to lose track of where you're going if you're just like trying to put out quantity. Then you kind of start going through the motions, and then maybe the care isn't there, and you're just putting out. So it's this fine balance or marriage that you have to find between those two modalities. It's just figuring out where are you in the process, like which one do you need to double down more on, I think. And you're never gonna not, it's something that you said, Daisy, too. It's like, you're never going to be fully over this thing. Sometimes you'll come back to it. Sometimes you'll need to do quantity and then more quality, just like you'll be self-conscious maybe one day and maybe not the next day.
That's so true. I think often, a lot of the times, how you feel starting a new project or podcast or whatever it is, you're going to likely feel different from the beginning to when you finish it. And I think that is going to be one of the big things that stops people from doing things, especially creatively, because you're judging yourself so much, because you're like, this has my name on it. Like, I care about this. I want it to be quote unquote perfect. But like you said, like the first sculpture you do, it's not going to be perfect. The second one, third one, they're never going to be perfect, but you're going to get better at it.
What is perfect, right?
Well, perfect doesn't exist.
Perfect's boring.
I'll be clear on that.
Boring.
Perfect's boring.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, it's Neil Gaiman quoting, I think, Lou Reed or someone from Velvet Underground, I think the guitarist. But I'm going to give Neil Gaiman the quote. And he said, "Style is the things you get wrong." And I think that is so true. And I always go back to like music, because I love a variety of music. I like hip hop. I like, you know, rock. I like traditional like band music. But I also really love like house music, like deep house, like, you know, Chicago house. Not like EDM, like more like house where they're blending in real instruments into the songs, because I think when it's just made on a computer and all the chords are hit perfectly, it gets kind of boring, versus when you mix in a instrument when there was a human being who had a little bit of an imperfection, you know, a little slow on this chord, and that just makes you resonate. It feels like it's real. And remembering that in like the work that you do, it's like the imperfections, it's like that's your style.
I love that.
I wrote that down. That resonates.
Well, it takes away the negative connotation associated with doing anything wrong. And it's like, I think like with all the things you talk about, like or anything you do, there's no wrong to it. Like, you're doing it, and that's the beautiful part of it.
Yeah, and it's all about like falling in love with the process. That's how you allow yourself to lean into like those imperfections. You know, you realize it's beautiful in its own way.
So for you right now, like where you're the stage you're at in Pool House, do you feel like you have an end goal, or do you feel like you've been able to just kind of like take each day at a time? Where I can imagine they're difficult to hold both of those, and I'm sure it fluctuates daily. But what is your relationship with like having a end goal, quote unquote?
Yeah, the goal is to just do what I'm currently doing at like being able to touch like more and more lives with like what we're already doing, growing the things that we're currently doing, from the community events, like being able to have an actual space that isn't our studio where we can host these events and gatherings, and being able to also teach people at these events like the skills that we've learned, because it's such a hard, I've talked about this before, there's no blueprint. And so being able to create a community where people can share their experiences, learn and grow and meet other people. That's one of the big goals. And then the clothing, be able to just expand this into an entire collection, hopefully, you know, one for seasons. I also want to do women's wear. I feel like it's just so much more exciting. I wish men's wear, I think there's a lot of creativity that's allowed in that, but being able to fully go into both modalities and have a like full onslaught of clothes, I think it's such a fun, creative way to express yourself and also just connect with people. I think it's, we connect with clothes a lot. And then with the art, just to keep doing it at a, not just doing it at a bigger scale, any of these things, because at the end of the day, there has to be like that intention, that purpose, and that meaning. So just being able to do it with more and more people and to talk to more people about it, eventually bringing my podcast back, have you guys on, being able to have like a studio for that, being able to make videos. I think like getting better at all of the modalities of making art for like the third pillar is a big goal. So whether that's being able to
make art.
Huh? Say it again.
I said, did someone say make art? I guess
I did. Yeah.
We got our hats on. So we have Andrew's awesome make art hats.
For those who are not watching, we have a nice purple. Is there a special way that you would like to describe the style of this, Andrew?
It's just a traditional dad hat. It's my favorite hat. It's the one that I always wear. I'm not wearing it right now because the lighting. I wanted to give you guys a full picture of my face, but yeah, I wear it all the time. That was one of the first products I think that we made. It was really, really cool time releasing those. Brings back a lot of memories. I feel like it's evolved so much since then too. It's crazy, and it hasn't even been that long.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine that you feel like you've just, in a way, moved on, and it's that maybe sounded really weird, but I understand like when you create something and like a part of you goes into it, and then like you've created something new, you identify so much more with the thing you've created new. But that's not to say that other thing's not just as valuable just because you're not identifying with it in the moment, which I think it's just an interesting thing about creating things and having a body of work.
It also comes back though, it's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I felt that immediately when you said that. I'm like, yeah, that is kind of how I feel. I feel like I moved on. We're creating like this like t-shirt, actual real piece of clothing. We've moved on from hats, but also too at the same time, like I still love hats. It's still and like the phrase, the make art thing, I'm still talking about it now. It's still like such a pivotal part of the brand. And so realizing that, maybe I'm gonna come back to those hats and like that whole like style. So it's just a funny way about life. Like so often we like look back at like the past stuff we've done, and we cringe because we think that we're doing better stuff now, but realizing that there was beauty there, and like there's a good chance that you're going to come back to that if it was real. If you were being genuine in that moment, I guarantee you're going to come back to it. That's been my experience. Yeah,
and I think it's also like it doesn't need to be this or that. It can be this and that. Like you could have made these make art hats, and you're making this awesome clothing. I think we're always so quick to say like two things can't exist at once. You can't have two things happening at the same time. Like one thing's better than the other. Always comparing things, and it's like, why can't things just exist equally? Everything's beautiful. Everything is great. Everything is a result of your passion and your drive, which is so clear. And it's like that process is going to continue to evolve until like the rest of your life. And that's why it's just so amazing to see the progression of like your hats. And then also we have Andrew's tote bag.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And
we've been some new colors coming out too.
Yeah. But it's so awesome. Like the evolution from the hat to this, it's just like, that's all of you, right? That's been you. And also not only is it you, but it's like you went from this kid like who was a lawyer to being like, oh, maybe like I'll have like X amount of followers. And now you've narrowed down your vision so much. Like it's you've come into yourself so clearly, and it's so clear in like the stuff you made and the way you're talking about it when you talk about like being at that law firm, being where you are now, the goal that you have to inspire more people. Yes, maybe do it on a larger scale, but for the reason of connecting to more people, touching more people's hearts. And like, that is so awesome. And it's so awesome to hear your story. And like, I really hope it does inspire other people, because you were a lawyer at one point. You were at that law firm, and here you are, like, right? Like you did it.
Yeah. And just, it really is so true. And it's like it's so hard to like leave something like that, but it's so worth it. Just like want to like reiterate that. It's like this weird juxtaposition. It's like, do you want an easy life or a life that you love? And it's like the thing that you love is not going to be easy. So, but yeah, it's something that's worth it, I think.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I just wanted to comment on that feels so, it just, you feel it with your brand, is the idea of having community and facilitating community in different ways. I think everyone right now is valuing that, especially what you're saying, like in person. Nothing can replace that. And I think it's incredibly genius to have a brand and have community that go hand in hand, where you can gather people who are aligned with this mission, aligned with what you're doing, and you can bring them together, and then they can meet. And that's an invaluable gift that you can give to your clientele, is that connecting them with other like-minded people. That, I think that is it. Like, that is what is so special and so purposeful and so amazing, which I love that vision. I'm so excited to see it grow and be a part of it.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that's been the most valuable thing about putting myself on the internet and Instagram, and has been the people that I've been able to meet. And if I could do that for other people, that is just the coolest thing ever, because not everybody has the confidence to, you know, talk about the things that they're into online, but like they're so much more willing when they're talking to people in the real world. So I think creating a space for people to do that is just such a thing that people need, that the world needs.
It so is. There's not enough of that. I think, especially looking for non-alcoholic communities that aren't just bars, that create a different way to connect, set a certain energy, a certain vibe, is so important too, because it can feel lonely without that. And I just think what you're doing is so cool, because it's so needed. Like, it's needed everywhere. Just community spaces that the tone is being set by someone, and that's exactly what you're doing with your events.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, do you feel like you ever, like, clearly you love so much what you do. Are there ever moments where you like think about if you'd ever done it differently, or do you feel like you know confidently now, like, this is, no matter what route it takes, like, this is the route that you're going to take?
Yeah, because I've thought of quitting a million times from Pool House, but then I imagined, I'm like, wait, Andrew, there's nothing else you would actually rather do, so this is it. You gotta keep going, buddy. And I think you were gonna ask also, would you ever go back to law, Andrew? Were you gonna ask that? Or?
Yeah, like on that route, yeah.
Because I actually mailed in, I think it was 2-3 weeks ago, my retirement form to the New York bar. And
wow.
So, yeah, it's not going back to that. That's for sure. Ain't retaking that test.
That must have felt
good.
Something.
Yeah, it felt so good. People were like, "Oh, were you nervous, Andrew?" I was like, "No, actually, I was relieved. I was wondering when they were going to send me that form."
It's so, yeah, I feel like that's the official, like, getting rid of that last layer of any residue, any residue of that prior life that you lived. So we want to ask you, let me ask everyone on our show, how are you going to continue to live your life unpotted?
I think it comes down to figuring out who you are. That is exactly how I've lived my life, but I realize that everyone is not like me. I always go back to, like, when you first answered that question, or asked that question, I go back to the analogy of people saying, are you an architect or are you a gardener? Because those are two different kinds of people. The gardener kind of doesn't have a concrete plan. They kind of see what opportunities present themselves, and then they they kind of move their garden according to what starts sprouting. Versus the architect plans everything ahead of time, and has like this clear vision for the building that they're going to build. And when you're building buildings, you need to be like that, right? But if you're going to be a gardener, or if you're going to be something in the creative field, or something where there's an unknown future, I think you need to give yourself wiggle room, like opportunities to pivot. And even if, unless you're in architecture, I feel like you really do need to have a pretty solid game plan. But even in the business world, I think things are going to change, and it'd be foolish to say that this is how it has to be. This is how it has to be done. And there's nothing wrong with having a game plan, but being open to serendipity has paid me so many dividends. Like, I am so happy that I didn't get the things that I thought I wanted, especially on this journey. There were so many things where it's like, oh, I wanted to work with like Disney. I wanted to get a book deal. I wanted to, there was so many things that I was like trying to get, and they just didn't work out, and I was so disappointed. But had those things happened, I wouldn't be here now, where I know that I'm supposed to be. So it's like remembering that it's okay for your plans to fail, or to not come true, because usually there's something better in store for you. So I guess it goes back to the analogy of allowing that plant to grow in whatever way it's meant to grow.
That's awesome. And so inspiring. Like, we talk about this all the time. Like, so many things you want so badly, and then you realize, wow, like I'm so glad that didn't work out.
Right? Especially at the law firm. Like, I wanted to get in like this venture capital firm, and I was so disappointed that I didn't get that job. And had I got it, I probably maybe would have stayed a lawyer. Who knows? I'm so glad I didn't.
We always talk about this, but I think it's really hard to change paths when everything's going perfect for you. Mm-hmm. So when things aren't perfect, that's when you're more likely to question, what do I need to change? And that's where something better always comes. So when something, you don't get it, it's not your way, it's such a way to like see that something else is opening up for you. You just don't see that yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I always say it's like a good book. Your life is like a good book. The meaning only becomes clear the more chapters you read.
I love that. Well, Andrew, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. It's been so inspiring hearing about your journey, starting in New York City as a lawyer, just thinking of Pool House, then letting Pool House kind of, take its shape as it did throughout the years, and seeing all the inspiring messages that you put out there in the world through your clothing, through the posts you put on social media, to kind of keep going, right? Enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. Like, it's really inspiring because every single thing that I see that you put out there just really is so clear in that. Like, it makes very clear what your goal is. And it's been so fun talking to you, and really think it will inspire other people too. If you feel stuck, you're never stuck. And probably feeling stuck is just a sign to you that you need to keep moving and explore something else.
Yeah. Thank you for having me too. I had a great time. This is awesome.
Andrew, do you want to let people know where they can find you, your Instagram, your website, anything exciting you have coming up?
Yeah, so Instagram's Pool House New York. The website's poolhousenewyork.com. We have some more colorways of our hoodies, t-shirts, and we have some sweatpants too coming in winter. And we also have some very exciting stuff for the springtime. We're working on a cropped bomber jacket out of a French terry material. So like all the products that we make, it's like this in-between place. We want you to be able to wear it at home, but also going out, something that's like aesthetic, that's stylish, but also very comfortable. That's why this t-shirt, there was a lot of attention put onto it to being able to wear it at home. And then I wanted a sweater that I could wear going out, but also home. So yeah, there's a lot of things in the works. So exciting stuff.
I like that, going out, but you could also wear it home.
yeah, in between places.
Interchangeable. Well, we're so excited for all that stuff, excited to continue to support, and thank you so much for joining us, and we're so excited to see where Pool House goes.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.